All right, well, we'll get underway. Good morning. Thank you for joining us here this morning and joined by my ministerial colleague, Minister for Multicultural Affairs, Ingrid Stitt. And I'm really pleased you've been able to join us here today in our media room at 1 Treasury Place. I think I've really come to value the regular conversations and engagement we've had previously with media conferences like this over at Parliament House. So it's great to be able to welcome you here into the government offices at 1 Treasury Place. But also too, can I thank you for the work and the role you perform as both being a voice of and a voice for your communities. I see many of you at different multicultural events and there are so many wonderful, rich, enjoyable multicultural events that I've attended just in the last few months alone. And so I see many of you performing that really important role as being the way you can communicate, whether it's government activities, reflecting community concerns, which I'll come to in a moment. Being that voice for your local communities is just such a vitally important part of the role you play. And Ingrid will have some more to say in a moment around ongoing support from the government. But there's a couple of things I just wanted to touch on at the outset before I hand over to Minister Stitt and then also open it up for broader questions and comments. Multicultural communities, multicultural families, multicultural working people are like all Victorians, and I hear directly from Victorians about what's important to them, and that's one of the great privileges of being Premier, is you get to hear very directly what's important to people, what their priorities are, what some of their concerns and challenges are as well. And also too, we know increasingly, whether it's in terms of some of those cost of living pressures that are really real for so many people and so many families, the challenges of being able to find a home, buy a home, start a family, and also to community safety are some of those key areas where my government has been listening really carefully to Victorian communities, listening to multicultural communities and families, and then putting in place the policies and actions to support people in these key priority areas. And there's a range of things we've been doing in the cost of living area, whether it's just most recently announcing our fair fuel plan, which will save motorists hundreds of dollars a year when they go and fill up their car with fuel. Last week I was at one of our great local schools where we were marking the school breakfast program, which we've now rolled out to every school in the state, every government school in the state, which is a free breakfast for kids, which means they can go to school ready to learn on a full tummy. And then also to the ongoing work we're doing in housing, building more homes, because more homes means people can find that opportunity to perhaps live in the area where they grew up in, which is also important, particularly if you're wanting to start a family. You want your family networks, you want your community networks around you, which is why our program, whether it's building more homes around train stations, making Victoria the townhouse capital with our changes and work around the planning reforms, all of this is about looking at how we can address that really critical issue, particularly for younger people who are looking to buy their first home, build their long-term wealth and also start their family. But I wanted to spend a little bit of time this morning discussing with you a couple of key laws that have been passed through the Victorian Parliament recently that go to the heart of what I know is an important issue for multicultural communities and families, and that is in the space of crime. Again, listening to the community and understanding that when it comes to community safety, communities are looking to government to put community safety first. And this is particularly important, and I've sat and listened to the experiences of many victims of crime. When you hear their experiences, when you hear the trauma that stays with those people and their families potentially for the rest of their lives, it is something that we have to respond to, and we have, which is why recently the Victorian Parliament passed the toughest bail laws in Australia, which is responding to that key issue and concern that has been raised by people in our community with this repeat pattern of offending that is in some of the most concerning areas, the aggravated burglary, the carjackings, the home invasions, which is why we were determined to put bail reforms to the Parliament, have them passed as quickly as possible, which I'm pleased to see that they were, and then be implemented immediately. And what this means is we have made a change, a key change, where all bail decisions have to consider community safety first above all considerations. What we've also done to support that is making it harder for people to get bail for those serious offences like those that I mentioned, like the home invasions, like the carjacking, like the aggravated burglary as well. And then also too, having in place a new regime that is seeing consequences if you break the rules. Bail isn't a right, it's a privilege. And if you breach bail, if you break the rules, well, there needs to be consequences. And under these changes, there are new offences if you offend once again whilst on bail. And then finally, too, as part of this package of changes and reforms, we've also introduced Australia's first machete ban. And this is, again, comes from listening very carefully to communities. These big, dangerous weapons, there's no place for them, on our streets or in our shopping centres, which is why we've brought about Australia's first ban on these dangerous machetes. I know too that there is, whether it's on our streets, whether it's in our homes or indeed within our temples, community safety is so important to communities right across the state, which is why we've driven these changes, and these changes have now been passed through the Victorian Parliament. The second area I wanted to touch on is also say thank you to Victoria's multicultural communities who have been on a unity ticket with each other and with the government on seeing the passage of the Anti-Vilification and social cohesion laws, because this is also about fighting another area of crime. It is about cracking down on hate, making hate a crime, making vilification a crime, strengthening the powers of Victoria Police, putting in place those civil protections as well. And this has come about as a result of a lot of work. And I know many people and leaders in our multicultural communities have worked so very hard to see these laws pass through the Parliament. And I want to thank those leaders who have worked with government, with the Parliament and with each other. As I said, there's been a unity ticket on this one because it comes from a very simple premise that whoever you pray to, whatever practice, culture you practice, what faith you follow, you deserve to be free from hate in our community. It's a simple but strong and powerful change that has been made to our crime laws here in the state of Victoria. And this is now law with the passage of the bill through the Parliament last week. And I've been a member of Parliament for a little while, and it was indeed a very proud moment to stand there and be part of a Parliament that is passing this bill. And I say this particularly in the context of since I've been Premier, the privilege and opportunity I've had to sit with our different multicultural groups, to participate in the festivals, to be welcomed into homes and temples around the state is the most rewarding part of the role as Premier. It certainly represents once again how fortunate and blessed we are here in Victoria. But in order to continue to have a strong, socially cohesive community into the future, we have to recognise that the times have changed, the context has changed, and our laws need to be strengthened, which is why we were determined to pass these laws through the Parliament, and they have done so. Now, if I can say though, I mentioned that multicultural groups were on a unity ticket. Sadly, the Parliament wasn't. Sadly, the Liberal Party chose to put peace in their party room ahead of peace on our streets, peace in our workplaces, peace in universities and other organisations. And that is a matter for them to answer those questions. Why, when the moment of history was before them to grasp that moment, to bring about this change in a unified way in the Parliament, they walked away from that opportunity. Well, the government was determined to see these bills passed, and this making hate a crime, bringing about the opportunity to strengthen our social cohesion here in Victoria, was a moment that I was not going to see the Victorian Parliament pass it by the Victorian Parliament, and which is why this is now law. And so on that point, I'll now hand over to Minister Stitt to add to my comments.
Thank you, Premier. Thank you. From the outset, can I say that we are so blessed in Victoria to live in a community that has such rich diversity. And I have the very great privilege as Minister for Multicultural Affairs to attend many celebrations right across the state. We have over 300 different cultural backgrounds in our state. We practice over 200 faiths and we speak almost 290 languages and dialects. We are one of the most successful multicultural communities in the world. But that can't be taken for granted, and that takes work. And it takes more than just words, it takes action. So I'm proud to be part of a government led by Premier Allan, taking action to support our diverse communities, and that has come in the form of a number of really critical reforms. We have announced our anti-racism strategy, which is a roadmap for taking decisive action across the community and across the whole of government to tackle racism in all its forms. We have passed nation-leading laws, as the Premier has just spoken to, with the Anti-Vilification and Social Cohesion Bill passing the Parliament, making it a crime, as it should be, to subject people across communities to hate and racism. This is decisive action, and this is what our government is determined to continue. I want to see a Victoria where our magnificent diversity is not just celebrated, but it's enshrined in our institutions and in our laws. So we will continue that work, and it's not always easy work. We know that we've seen a significant rise in anti-Semitic behaviour, in Islamophobia, and we have strong plans to engage with those communities to tackle these problems, and we'll continue to do that hard work. I've also, in my many dealings with our diverse communities, I acknowledge the really important role that our multicultural media outlets and organisations play in making sure that everybody has the opportunity to be included in the discourse in Victoria around what's important for our communities. And that's why we've been really proud to support grants for our multicultural media outlets this term, and last year we announced grants of up to $25,000 would be available for organisations to strengthen their capacity to provide their communities with in-language and up-to-date information about what's happening in the community. We know that in-language news and information is so important. It's about making sure that everybody has the right to participate in our democracy and our community decisions and our social cohesion. So, as the most multicultural state in the country, we've got a long history of celebrating our linguistic and community diversity, and we will be announcing very soon another round of successful media outlet grants, which will help all of you do the job that you do in the community and continue to grow your capacity and update your equipment, and also be able to support the next generation of multicultural media professionals into the future. So we'll have more to say about that very soon. But I do want to acknowledge the important role that you play in not only keeping your communities informed, but also making sure that they can participate fully in our democracy. Thank you.
All right. I might just pop that there. No, it doesn't want to go that way. There we go. Okay, we'll open it up for questions, please.
We looked at the latest statistics, and I'm sure you're aware of that's one of the issues and the policies. There's been a kind of a 87,000 plus rise in home invasion and criminality. We are aware of the stance you've taken. A lot of the victims are in high migrant populations. The difference between aspiration and poverty are probably more stark in those areas. But just for a broad question, what do you think will be done in the future? I mean, is there going to be more policing? Is it more punitive? Or is there strategies to stop these waves? I mean, it can't be just the economy and poverty. It must be a confluence of many issues that create these waves.
Yeah, there's no doubt that context is important. Context is important when you consider the global inflationary pressures, the cost of living pressures, the breakdown of social cohesion and the pressures that is putting on families and traditional cultural groups as well. There's a number of reasons. But what's also a factor at play is that, and it's to me unacceptable, that there is a group in our community who are engaging in this repeat pattern of incredibly risky behaviour to themselves, as we are seeing far too tragically, but also behaviour that is impacting on too many people in our community. And I mentioned earlier, I've sat and listened to victims of crime, to a woman whose husband was stabbed chasing an offender from their family home. And that to me is unacceptable, absolutely unacceptable, and which is why, in terms of looking at how we respond as a government, you're right to identify that you need to, if you like, have a holistic response. But what we are seeing is we had to put a jolt through the system, because at the centre of this is this repeat offending, high-risk behaviour that the system needed to change to respond to, which is why these tough new bail laws were so important, toughening the tests, putting community safety first, because I don't want to put words in your mouth, but I know that, and many Victorians have told me, they were frustrated that too many of these repeat offenders were being allowed to offend again, that the system was allowing them to offend again. So we had to put a jolt through the system to stop this repeat pattern of offending. But it does need to be seen in that broader context. Victoria has the highest number of police of any jurisdiction, any state jurisdiction in Australia. And we are giving police, alongside uniforms on streets, we are giving them additional tools and resources. But the laws need to be changed too to give police those additional powers, like we have done with the anti-vilification laws. So we needed to do with the machete ban and the tougher bail laws. But also too, we also want to make sure that for those particularly younger people, that we can grab them earlier, we can provide them with support. And that is why some of the changes we made last year bring, in terms of the youth justice framework, bringing in stronger diversionary programs that are involving Victoria Police, making sure that we have rehabilitation programs that start from the moment should a young person offend and they end up in remand, that those rehabilitation programs commence then, not at the point at which they may be incarcerated on a more ongoing basis. So these are some of the changes we've made. And then, of course, one of the best antidotes, one of the best solutions for particularly for young people, is engaging them meaningfully in education and training and in jobs. And that is what, for me, jobs are just so important. And we will continue to have a focus on how we can continue to support pathways for young people into jobs. There are specific programs that are both across broader youth groups, but also work with particular multicultural communities, with young people in their own community. There are programs that go on in our schools. Free TAFE is a great example of how we provide young people with a pathway to a better future. So this is, going back to your first question, this is how we respond as a system. But in terms of the tough new bail laws, there was an issue at the heart of that needed to be addressed, and we addressed it with the laws that went through the Parliament. Thank you.
We understand these reforms and measures that you are taking to curb crime across the state, but how will you measure the success of these reforms and measures that you are taking? Have you set any targets for yourself in measuring the success of these reforms and measures?
Yeah, no, thank you, and that is a really good point. We need to see the overall numbers come down in terms of the number of offences that are being committed. We also need to see the justice system respond and implement these tough new bail laws, and it is my expectation that we will see the number of people on remand increase. And so we are also gearing up our correction system, which has capacity today, but we know it'll need more capacity into the future to be able to accommodate what I expect to be the increased number of people on remand for committing these more serious offences.
Is there any timeline that you can give us?
Well, in terms of the first tranche of the laws, it's already in place. It's already law. The courts are already responding. We also will be bringing a further bill to the Parliament to continue to bring in another tough new test for some of this repeat behaviour. But that first tranche of community safety as they first an overriding principle when it comes to all bail decisions, bringing in the tougher new tests, bringing in new offences for breaches of bail. All of these elements are already law and are already being implemented. Yes, thank you.
Premier, recently a Sikh child was attacked at Mount Whitley College in Melbourne's north. And it's not the first in the series where a child is targeted who's wearing a patka or turban. I'm asking because I represent the Punjabi community.
Yes.
So with these reforms, do you think is there any preventative measure being taken with educators
Yeah.
and so the communities all together? How, like not on the paper, how these new reforms will be applied practically at the sea level for the migrant communities?
Yeah. Firstly, can I convey my thoughts to the young person and also their family, because obviously this is a shocking attack on the young person themselves, an attack on their identity and who they are, goes to the very core of who they are. But also it has an effect right across community, in family groups and right across community. So please send my love and thoughts to the family that is involved. This also, again, if you don't mind me referring back to Fotis's earlier question, it does go back to what we need to do as a society. And one of the, in terms of your question around what's going on in schools, one of the changes that we have brought about originally it was through the frame of violence against women. The Respectful Relationships program is a program that came about as a result of the Royal Commission into Family Violence. But at its core, it's about teaching from littlest preps all the way through to secondary school. It's about teaching young people about why bullying that can turn violent is wrong. It's about educating young people about difference, about respecting and understanding and celebrating difference, about providing young people with the tools to both speak out when they see this sort of behaviour occurring, and also giving them resilience tools. And I say this in the context I've seen my own kids go through this program in their primary school and the difference it's made to them in terms of understanding why why it's wrong to stand by and watch other people being bullied, harassed for being different, for looking different, for perhaps wearing cultural attire. So in terms of what's going on in our schools do a huge amount of work as well, I should acknowledge, and our government is supporting them with that work. In terms of the laws, though, the laws still remain there. If a young person is being abused simply for wearing, in this instance, a turban, well, our new hate laws are in place for Victoria Police to prosecute. And in turn, that also is about sending a very strong message about who we are and what we are as a society, and how the law will protect you, as it should.
Premier, I have two questions for you.
Sure.
One is just following up from her question. One of the Hindu temple was vandalized just at the holy time, and it took forensics to come there 24 hours at the temple. And there was a kind of, I personally wrote to a number of ministers and I had no response from them, despite they saying they're coming back to us. So when it comes to Islamophobia or anti-Semitism, there is a response which is a fantastic thing from governments. But when it comes to Hinduphobia or things happening around them, there is kind of, the community understand that government doesn't respond the same way, the way it should be.
Look, thank you for your question. And the attacks of vandalism on temples that we are seeing, again, goes in that category of that unacceptable behaviour that we are seeing too much of. And it is my expectation that Victoria Police respond respond because it is a crime and it does need to be dealt with. But one of the discussions, I've had many discussions, but just as recently as last week, I met with a number of representatives from Victoria's Hindu community, and this issue was raised. And we had a really important discussion about what further steps the government could take, but also work with Victoria Police to both strengthen the pathways in where there are incidences like this and how we collectively respond. And this is something I'll be pursuing with Victoria Police, because it doesn't, again, whether it's Islamophobia, anti-Semitism, attacks on Hindu temples, it's all the same. It's all hateful behaviour that needs to be dealt with, needs to be prosecuted, but also too around that, what additional supports we need to provide to those communities who, you know, an attack on a temple, again, strikes to the core of that community's faith and religion and practice. And that to me is absolutely unacceptable and does need a strong response from Victoria Police.
And secondly, Premier, let's talk about the elections. How do you see elections going, federal election, though it's not your preview, but how do you see the elections going in Victoria, Labour Party doing? And there is a budget around that you are not campaigning with Prime Minister. How do you respond?
Well, I had the great pleasure of spending this morning with the Prime Minister at Sunshine Station. And this was, I've been with the Prime Minister on a number of occasions on his visits to Melbourne and Victoria. And can I say, it's wonderful to have a Prime Minister who's a Prime Minister for the nation, not just the Prime Minister for Sydney. He knows where Melbourne is. He backs the projects that Melbourne and Victoria wants and needs. And that's a far cry from the other contender, who's a Queenslander who wants to live in Sydney and just doesn't understand Melbourne. And I say that in the context that the reason why the Prime Minister and I were at Sunshine Station this morning is because Sunshine Station is the heart of the Melbourne Airport Rail project. You cannot deliver a train line to the Melbourne Airport that connects into the suburban train network, that provides regional passengers the opportunity to connect into the airport without the massive transformation at Sunshine Station that federal and state Labor governments are delivering. Now, Peter Dutton announced last week that he will cut that project. He will cut into that project. He will cut those connections to the airport, to the city, to the country. It's also, too, cutting off future opportunities, because cutting into Sunshine, part of the project is bringing in new signalling, laying new tracks. It's also the next step in bringing on electrification to Melton, one of Australia's fastest growing communities. All of this is what Peter Dutton announced last week that he would cut. And I must say, for those of us who've been around for a while, Victorians know that this is a little bit back to the future. Victorians know the last time Peter Dutton sat at the federal cabinet table, the Liberal Party didn't just fund Victorian infrastructure projects, they took money off us. Like the Metro Tunnel, which is opening up later this year, they took $3 billion off that project. They ripped it away from Melbourne and Victoria. So really for me, I know there's a lot of commentary. I'll leave that commentary to others. For me, Victorians should be focused on the choice they have at this election, a choice between a Prime Minister who understands Melbourne and Victoria, who backs Melbourne and Victoria, who also wants to back working people and families, strengthening Medicare, investing in infrastructure, investing in jobs, or Peter Dutton and a Liberal Party who are all about cuts to Medicare, cuts to our health system, cuts to our infrastructure program. And as Victorians know, this is something we've all seen before from Peter Dutton's Liberals. I'll go one there, yeah.
Premier, you have legislation against hate, and there is a feeling in the community, some people, that it hurts freedom of speech, So, and I thought about it, and there is a thin line between the two. So, how do you respond to that? What do you respond? What is your response?
Yeah, look, I've heard those comments, and I would suggest this is yet another shifting of the goalposts from a Liberal Party who never wanted to support this bill. Because yes, we all respect and value the responsibility that we have in our society that comes with the right of freedom of speech in our strong, vibrant democracy. But I also believe very, very strongly that whether it's a young man in a turban, a young Jewish boy on his way to school, or a young woman at a shopping centre in a hijab, they all also deserve the freedom of safety in our community. And that's what this bill is about. This bill is about strengthening safety, because hateful speech that turns to violence, that's not freedom of speech, that's hate, that's a crime, and that's why the Anti-Vilification Bill is just so important, because it makes that behaviour a crime.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you.
I'm Renee from Live Media, and we have many young Mandarin-speaking audiences. And my question also about anti-vilification law, and I also have a case that I witnessed over the weekend. So I witnessed an unfortunate incident of racial discrimination at Docklands towards an Asian man. And if the bill has already been passed, how would you suggest the victim to use the bill to better protect himself?
Yeah. Well, firstly, let me say that it shouldn't have got to this. Like, that is just not acceptable. And again, my sympathy to that young man and for that experience. And this again underscores why the Anti-Vilification Bill is just so important. It is just so important because it goes back to what I said before. You should be free to walk safely on our streets. You should be free to practice your culture and faith in a safe and strong way in our community. And I think overwhelmingly Victoria is a strong and safe and respectful place, but there is no doubt we are seeing, as a result of some broader changes globally, that for some there is a fear, there is a risk, and that is unacceptable. In terms of individual circumstances, they should absolutely be in contact with Victoria Police. But let's also remember one of the important opportunities that come with having this Anti-Vilification and Social Cohesion Bill. It gives us the opportunity to educate, and it goes back to that previous question. It gives us the opportunity to educate, to talk about the sort of society we want to live in here in Victoria, to push back against some of the hateful content that we're seeing, whether it's on our streets or whether it's online, is to explain, to educate, to support, and why this is so important, which is why the work that Ingrid is leading alongside and the work that Ingrid and I have asked George Lakakis to do is so very important. Multicultural Victoria matters. It's one of our great strengths. But to keep it strong, we have to protect it, and we have to protect it in new ways, which is what this Anti-Vilification Bill is about.
Sorry, Minister and Premier, now that you've mentioned George Lakakis and the, I guess, what seems to us to be a kind of a review of many things, the DMC and across, can I ask, will it be also taking into account other departments like Creative Victoria, Immigration Museum? We've seen, for example, Immigration Museum is so much less about immigration than everything else in recent times. We've seen Creative Victoria, tourism. Multiculturalism is one of your great brands, and yet somehow these departments seem to not be missing in action often when it comes to communications, when it comes to engagement. So maybe to you.
Yeah, I'll absolutely ask Minister Stitt to address this question. But again, it goes back to those broader observations I was making at the start, that we have new challenges. In 2025, we have new challenges that we have not seen in some instances for generations, some we've never seen before, in terms of how social media and social platforms are weaponised as vehicles for hate. So we have to respond to those challenges. We have to look at how we both respond, put new tools in our kit bag, and also to recognise that social cohesion has been frayed as a result of all of this global context. And so that is why the work that George Lakakis is doing is looking at what we need to do to better support our multicultural communities. And when it comes to asking George Lakakis to do the work, well, he's just about the best. And maybe I shouldn't qualify that. He is the best. He is the best. He is the best. And multicultural communities, it's just so important. It's important we get this next phase right. The laws are a big part of that architecture, but so too is those the cultural institutions, our cultural way of life. So I'll just ask Minister Stitt to add to that.
Thank you, and it's a good question and a great point. And I think one of the first decisions that Premier Allan made when she came into or formed the Allan government was to bring multicultural affairs back into the Department of Premier and Cabinet so that it had a whole of government focus, which is powerful and important. And I know that our department spends a lot of time working with other departments to make sure that the voices of multicultural communities comes through the work that they do in their specific portfolio areas of responsibility. So that's point number one. And in relation to the Lakakis review, I agree with the Premier. He is the perfect person to undertake this review, but he will be engaging very closely with a large number of multicultural leaders and communities, because it's important that we get this right. We're really good at celebrating our diversity, no question about that. We love to celebrate, but there's no question that our social cohesion has come under significant pressure of late, and I want to make sure that our multicultural institutions are fit for the future, and that's the really sharp focus that George Lakakis will bring to his work. And in a couple of months, he will make recommendations to me, and we'll have more to say. But I think it's really timely that we do this work and that we take a whole of community and a whole of government approach to it.
Thank you.
Just a question. Marco Ballerino from the Globe. Premier, talking back to the future of Victoria and in broad sense, the economy of this state, your government key priorities to ensure financial stability and also growth for this state, also in terms of investment and working with federal government.
Yes.
The priority.
Well, one of the priorities I identified when I became Premier in September 2023 was to have a focus on growth, jobs growth, economic growth, because I keenly understand, as someone who grew up in a working family, just how central having a job is to your family being secure and then being able to go on and achieve whatever it is that family wants to achieve. But also too, it goes to why we have a strong infrastructure pipeline, because that means jobs, a consistency of jobs. It's why we've invested in our strong education and TAFE system, because that's skilling the workers that we need for the future. But we know we need to find new ways to continue to grow and support jobs, which is why in the economic growth strategy that was released late last year, it identifies priority industry sectors that I am focused on, where we see as an opportunity to grow jobs. Advanced manufacturing, for example, particularly in the defence industry, particularly in partnering with big companies who are already investing here in Victoria. You have the big companies investing, but what it also means is there's a huge number of manufacturing businesses, whether it's in the southeastern suburbs, in the north or the west, or in regional Victoria as well, that are part of a really strong and vibrant supply chain. The medical research sector is another critically important area that leverages off our tertiary education strength. Doing this work has become even more important as a consequence of what President Trump announced last Thursday, ensuring that we have strong local supply chains, that we are supporting our businesses to find strong local opportunities is so critically important, which is why when I was Transport Infrastructure Minister, I introduced a couple of key policies. One, requiring all of our major projects to have at least 10% of apprentices working on those projects, recognising that that's setting them up for the future. Secondly, having strong local content requirements, which means that companies here in Victoria and Melbourne get a head start when it comes for bidding for the work. And a great example of that is we now have trains being manufactured again here in Melbourne and Victoria, where previously that was an industry that was dying. So I was really, last week when in very quick time following those unjustifiable announcements around tariffs that came out of the US, the Prime Minister made a series of announcements that was putting Australian businesses at the front of the queue, protecting our biosecurity. And I also say this, Victoria is the nation's food bowl. We are the nation's food bowl. We are known globally for our clean, green produce that is wanted the world over in the world export markets, which is why one of the things we will be doing here in Victoria is looking for new export markets for particularly for our food industry, particularly beef, who are perhaps we're seeing, well, if Donald Trump in America doesn't want Australian beef, it's a top quality product. There will be other markets that do, and we want to support them to find those opportunities. So jobs is a central part of my agenda. It's a central part of the work we're doing for two reasons. It's important for a strong economy, but fundamentally too, it's important to provide families with the security of a pay packet going home at the end of every week. All right, probably, yeah, two more? Okay, yeah. Yes.
Namaste, Madam PM. Good afternoon. I'm Siddharth from Southeast Events. Thank you for two bills. I've got only two questions.
Yep.
One is, what is the root cause of the rising the crime in
Yeah.
Victoria? And second is, how was your trip to India?
Yes, well, the answer to the first one, look, I think there's a number of reasons why we are seeing rising repeat offending. And this is a question when I have the opportunity to speak to informally to members of Victoria Police, I often say to them, from your perspective, what's changed? Because there is no doubt that something has changed. And there's a number of factors in that. There's a number of factors, and they're not all equal, but there's a number of factors. The global pressures that people feel under, the cost of living pressures, some of the challenges that we're experiencing coming out of the COVID period. There's no doubt a group of people feel disconnected in a way that they hadn't previously. There's also too, I don't want to just blame social media. I think I don't want that to be the only reason, but there is no doubt the influencing impact, the negative, sometimes evil influencing impact of social media is a contributing factor. And then finally too, our laws were a factor, which is why they needed to be changed. We needed to change and get the focus back on community safety. We needed to change the remand as a last resort and put community safety first and bring in the tougher new bail test to break this cycle of that repeat offending. So there are many factors, and we are going to the heart of the one that we are most directly responsible for, which is strengthening the laws and supporting the work of Victoria Police. On the second question, I don't know if we've got all day for me to spend talking about how wonderful my trip to India was, because it was an incredibly rewarding and enriching experience. Incredibly rewarding. It was my first overseas trip as Premier, having the honour of representing our state overseas. And what struck me from every single meeting I had whilst I was in Delhi, whether it was a business meeting, a government meeting, a community meeting, the visit to a school, the strong ties, the warmth that people in India, in all those different organisations and institutions, the warmth and respect and regard they have for Melbourne and Victoria is strong. And my responsibility is to strengthen it even more, which is why, whilst I was there, we released the India strategy, the Victoria India strategy, that identifies priority sectors that we are going to work, transnational education being a key example of that. And then also too, a number of the business engagements that I had whilst I was there are reaping rewards and opportunities for us here in Melbourne. And a few weeks ago, I opened the office of First Source, which is an important Indian company who've made a big investment. They've got workers who've already working here in the heart of Melbourne, and they want to expand because they see Melbourne as a great place to have their headquarters. And it's come about as a result of great relationships. And great relationships, though, the best relationships are the ones where you keep working together in a really positive way, which was the focus of my visit. And then, of course, over summer, we had the Kabaddi game, which we announced whilst we were in India. I had COVID. I missed the Kabaddi game because I had COVID. I was so looking forward to attending. And that, of course, was held on day 3 of the Australia-India test. I'm not sure if, I know Australia did pretty well that series. I know. We reversed the previous results. So it's again, that's another way that we enrich those really strong cultural ties that we have with India. Thank you. Last question. I just want you. Yeah.
expressed his interest on the bill. So do you think this is an indication of the popularity of the bill?
Yeah, I think it. Thank you for that question. For me, it speaks to its importance. For me, it speaks to the importance, and it goes to some comments Minister Stitt made before. It's one thing to speak. It's one thing to come to events, as I've done so many events, to make speeches. It's another thing to act. And the community is looking to government to act, and we have, in very, very strong terms, to make hateful behaviour a crime. Because communities are looking to government to lead, to strengthen the law, to recognise that social cohesion has frayed, and that should not be allowed to continue to fray, that we have to step in and take strong action, which is why having the Anti-Vilification Bill pass the Parliament, the work that George Lakakis does, the work that we do in supporting multicultural media is all part of that interlocking fabric that keeps our community strong. But most importantly, keeps our young people safe. Thank you very much for your time today. It's lovely to see you.